was one of the most interesting days I've ever encountered, so one deserving of its own little spot. So I was able to wake up early this time, so I woke up, I marinated some meat to cook for breakfast for about 30 minutes, and then I hurried my mom up. I didn't want her to disrupt the momentum I already got, so I got to showering, and after that, I then cooked my marinated meat, and then I headed down to school pretty early. Bad thing is that I saw a friend group that looked like one I visit occasionally, but they were not the same people, though they look similar. So I ended up joining the incorrect friend group, and one ended up leaving elsewhere because I wasn't able to host a full conversation, and for the other person, I wasn't able to hold a conversation either, despite me asking what their names are. Good example of false pattern recognition. First period, we practiced Spanish this time, taking care of the irregular y'all verbs and conjugating them. I had a little bit of trouble. I practiced a little bit of the haber plus past participle for verbs for self-practice during class, though our class did not get to that topic yet. One of the kids told me to say yo sabo, and I wanted to say it, but the teacher was about to explode comedically, so I wanted to say yo pienso que la respuesta correcta es yo sabo, but instead, since the teacher knew I was going to say it, I followed it with silence and said yo sé instead. Second period, we did typical circuit exercises, typical ones as everyone would go through in PE class, though a bit shorter since it was a bit rainy today and we had to go inside. I wanted to set up a new interaction, and I ended up walking around with one of the kids instead. We messed with the blue rolling tiles at the corner. In the end, I wanted to talk to another different person, but I wasn't able to since we didn't have time. But during the middle of all of that, of course, I faced Nicole's friend group. You guys tried trapping me into the little blue tiles where the kid was, and I was not gonna let that budge at all. Tell me up something about not talking about you guys on Instagram and not to speak of you guys again, or that bad things will happen. A little simple, innocent threats, which is an oxymoron right there. A mention that of that something is that nobody watches his videos, and this is not meant for fame. This isn't meant for views. This is meant for longevity. Fame comes much, much later on. In response to that simple threat, in that if I speak about you guys, something bad is going to happen to me, is that I work in the abstract parliament of future selves, but also if the idea of if my friends were with me, what would they say? Future me would tell me to keep going, obviously. And if my friend from elementary school here, they'd also be laughing. And even a random adult walking on the street would probably roll their eyes up. I'm so much to even say, even the friend groups I was in before, if it was like a random boy, a random girl, even like a random trans friend from all those friend groups, if we explore one of them and they're with me right now in that moment, they will probably end up laughing symbolically. The thing is that by enlightenment standards, we work by reason over fear. And I am not going to simply say a friend group just because they tell me not to talk about them. Using the tool of the enlightenment, this is an origami textbook of a paper tiger. Don't talk about us or else something bad will happen. Does not override constitutional and platform rights. Though it's not an excuse to speak improperly about people, but it's a tool of informal hierarchy that simply not many people ever recognize. I myself don't even recognize it unless you're in the social game. Third period, this time I worked on a web quest regarding sea and wind breeze and how weather systems and wind work. I completed the first three sections, and obviously the typical two girls in my class had some funny moments. One tried to improperly throw a water bottle at the teacher comedically, and they had the typical girl fight arguments, and even a boy used his middle finger, which is bandaged up, to flip off his own friend for comedic effect. Even the teacher laughed too. Fourth period, we continued on Adolf's rule over Germany and his role in World War II. Like the video guide I watched, we saw how people who needed a strong ruler inadvertently voted in the person who would do much worse. After that note taking, I worked on a Spanish assignment and finished up with some random Google searches. Lunch period, this is where I came upon a very big realization. Today, as a result, I will add 1 unit of social growth, since I am learning much more about the complexity of people around me at such a young age. Now, I decided to jump into a risky topic as much as I didn't want to, about being asked out on the topic of boyfriends and girlfriends to one of you guys. Courtesy to you know who you are, I talked to you during lunch, but I'm not going to name you just for privacy reasons. I asked, have you ever been through any drama in school? Boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe? You answered something similar to, not really. I asked the groundbreaking question of, has anyone ever asked you out during your freshman or sophomore years? And he said no, so then I jumped straight into the nuances of sociality, though I don't remember the exact conversation. He said something similar to that. You mostly said no to boys and you weren't in any relationship then, so that means you weren't in as much drama. And then you rejected boys who asked for Instagram straight up. You also explained to me that for some, you gave them a fake account and then blocked them. Soon after, you said that they should get the hint because the boy doesn't know how to take a note and they might attack or do something worse if they had your actual Instagram account. And what I'm beginning to realize is that my personality usually veers to politeness and explicitness. Like if someone say no, someone say no. What I now realize is that in a society full of boys and girls who simply can't take no sometimes, it becomes a protective instinct. A girl, for example, let's say who's been treated bad by boys who can't take no. After many times, let's say I end up going to her and then one day I try to be her friend. If the conversation goes awkward, then she might end up giving me a fake account and then blocking me because she might end up thinking that I'm one of those boys, even though I am not. Using social play tectonics, I am unfairly subducted under some generalizations. Maybe that boys that she's met will treat her better and that the next one might do the same. It's not wrong. I mean, but that same protection would guarantee self-sovereignty, but it also guarantees missed interactions. Vice versa also exists for boys relative to girls. I mean, for me, it explains time and time again. When I went up to both girl and boyfriend groups once, there was one morning where I met one girl, then I got her Instagram. And then at lunch, I met with another similar girl who coincidentally knew the girl that morning. I asked her for Instagram, and then later on, they ended up both blocking me. Because they assumed I had malice intentions, they may have subducted me unfairly under other boys' generalizations. It explains time and time again. Even with another online friends experience I talked about long ago. Credit to you if you're also watching as the one who sends me reels very often. I'm talking about the one who had like a red profile picture until you changed it to an opinion profile picture. Now, you also said to me that when you were in school in some social place, boys also hovered over you. They treated you bad. That means, there was always someone watching. The boys always had some sort of malice intention. just leaving it like that, even though it was not overt hostility. Even the legend of the liquor video I said earlier, those people ended up blocking me like 2 days ago, though for a completely different reason. All of these belong in completely different frameworks, but they still explain a very similar social problem, generalizations, and a lot of self protection. Now, I've identified a protective mechanism that girls and boys have, but it leaves people lonely, though it keeps them self sovereign. When you run through by so many bad people, you start to think that other people are bad too. You can't trust others. That's why some people start using fake accounts that are given by some. People even then start to equate asking for someone's Instagram as equal to asking them out, even though I believe that this is generally false, but it depends on the context. As I becomes a protective instinct. Under a lot of self sovereignty, it also guarantees isolation under a few contexts I talk about. Also, writing accounts before when I've been structurally rejected or maybe left out. Write again to a girl that I met back in the library at the start of this year. What if she, I mean, I already knew she had generalizations of boys too, though for similar reasons. What if she thought I was one of those boys? What if I got socially subducted under her judgments because she was trying to protect herself? Or maybe something for a different reason, I don't know. But that same result is we end up being structurally abandoned, not because we're bad people, but because of their own intentions. They're trying to protect themselves from an enemy that is known, though we do not represent that enemy. From now on, is that I realized others wouldn't block me because they hate me, but because they can't trust other people. So I'll make sure to respond to that gently. Fifth period, I bet 4 cents that students would be late, and there was one student who was late, so I won it and put in the teacher's tip jar. We continued on Lord of the Flies, 76 through 96, and I finished right before chapter 6. I worked on an assignment about it using quotes from the text. Of course, the boys were crazy. I don't remember any specific events about them that was happening during class, but in the story, now we're jumping to the point where the characters are acting crazy over abuse and how the rules beginning to decline. So that was, I know later on in Lord of the Flies, it's not really a good ending anyway, but later on, not really much happens in the class itself, though I did skim at the end of Lord of the Flies, so it's kind of look at a taste of the ending. Now, sixth period, I continued on math parabolas, though the teacher interrupted the class since apparently the class got a 48% average, and I just got reminded that I do got to turn in my work for Canvas for this class. Average since not many did the review. I had to spend 15 minutes watching her do the teacher lecture, and it was a little bit annoying since I wanted to get down to work. After that, I did finish up the math review. The teacher gave us paper to write on. I just used my scrap paper to show all the work. There was one boy in the class who was excited, and there was another one who was chill. Both absolutely competed who wanted to answer on what question, and the class even laughed a little bit. Later on, I finished my work, and I decided that at the end of class, since there's a girl nearby, maybe I should set up maybe a few interactions. I remember that what I was told during lunch. If I do not enforce my own boundaries or if we go too overboard too soon, then there's going to be problems. So instead, I decided to finish up some other work. And this time, despite there being very little people for tutoring after the math class, I was able to hold a three-way conversation between the teacher, me, and the girl, though I forgot what her name was. So if you're watching this in the future, in a long time from now, big credits to you. You appeared in like a little cameo in my story at like 4 p.m. in the afternoon on February 11th. But whatever the case is that it went quite well. I kept asking the teacher about how to use parabolas and vertex, and I was curious if a parabola's curve, if it's gentle enough, can intersect with a cosine equation if it's gentle about many, many, many times. And the teacher agreed. I even went on the board and tried a little bit of a demonstration. I asked about the general stuff on like the three-way conversation, like how's your day? If anything happened, what's going on? Nothing much. So oddly enough, the girl said to me, I wouldn't have talked if you didn't approach, which I find quite interesting. Obviously, I'm not going to record every single bit of the conversation since that's a little bit overboard, but I don't hear things like that real often, so I'm just going to note it anyway. Though I did misinterpret her way of saying approach as approach, since I don't hear as good. I had to go since my mom was waiting, and I asked the teacher if she had anything, and she said no. I asked the girl if she could talk later on for her media, and she said she don't got media, so I eventually left and relaxed after. And yes, I also got reminded since I just covered sixth period. Now I do have to turn in my work for my math since I got a parabola test tomorrow.